Hi everyone, I'm Scott Schneider. This is Stereo Niche. Hey, this week I'm going to continue with ADS and talk about the L710, so stick around. All right, so this is the L710 from ADS. So this is the start of the line, of the model line of that series. So this is the smaller version. There was an L710, an L810, and a 910 from this particular series. So this series started around 1976 and went to, I think, 1980. It had a retail of $500 a pair. It is a 4-ohm speaker, and it had some sensitivity ranges. So I say that because I pulled my sensitivity ratings from Stereo Review magazine. If you don't recall, Stereo Review was extremely popular. I think it's moved on to change its name slightly, but back in the 70s, it was one of the best magazines. I would get the annual review every year and go through all of the manufacturers. And so in this particular time frame, this is an early set. So when I was doing my L810 review, which is also kind of an early set, I only went to the very first year, wherein they denoted the sensitivity at 88 decibels. Well, after that, in 77 and forward, they showed the sensitivity at 93. So someone else wanted to comment that it was in the 94, but you know, all I can do is tell you what Stereo Review put in their magazine. And so that's what they rated at the time. So early ones may be 88, later ones may be 93. So just something for you to be aware of. And then lastly, it is a 3-way like the other models. And I say that because the Advent is a 2-way, of course. So they do other things about this particular set. Now this is early. In the very early release of the 710, apparently they did not find a manufacturer to make the correct size rubber surrounds for this particular size woofer. So they had to go with foam in the early days of the release of the model. So this particular set, when I got it, of course, the foam surrounds were long gone. So I had to find a replacement. Well, when I did these about 11 or 12 years ago, there were no correct size foam surrounds for them that I could find. So I had to buy a slightly larger set with the same roll and same dimensions other than the overall width. So I had to cut them down. I had to get a larger set, cut them down slightly. I say that because when you see the close-up shots, you'll see a seam right here, and I put it in the same place on each one of the woofers. Someone's going to skip over this section and point that out. I did it, so I'm aware of it. It was the only option I had at the time. But if you were going to do a set, of course, you'll want to get the correct size. So that is an unusual difference for these. The other thing I did want to point out is on the back, being an early set, they have a screw-on binding post. This is not the best kind of best way to attach your speaker wire. If you have that kind, I would recommend putting on a hoop on the back, on the end of your speaker wire, attach it, crimp it on, and then attach them over the screw head and then put the nut on. Just a safe way to make sure that over time, as it vibrates, it doesn't come loose and your wires become disconnected. I think that's kind of it. We'll go to the close-ups now, and then I'll come back and give you my thoughts on how they sound. All right, so let's talk about sound. How do they sound compared to the Advent? So this one I did a little bit differently, although the main comparison is against the Advent. Since I had the L810s still in place and it was one step up, I did do a little bit of back and forth with them as well, just to get a little bit of comparison. So did a little bit more review this time. I'd say a ABC comparison versus just AB. So let's start out with style. So on the style side of things, you know, they look the same as the L810, so they get sort of that same, not as much styling perspective. They're sort of, you know, not a whole lot of character, I would say. But the one thing that is different is that they're a little smaller. So they can accommodate a little more space, a little bit easier. They can also be more easily turned on their side. That's one way of also, you have that option of turning them on their side. I did do that as well, listen to them that way, just to see if there was a dramatic difference. I would say maybe there was a slight difference in the soundstage, perhaps, but overall, you know, still sound pretty much the same. So because they have a little more flexibility, I gave them an additional point compared to the L810. So I gave them 13 on their style because they can be a little more accommodating. So on to imaging, I found it to be, you know, they have similar type drivers. So I found it obviously very similar to the 810. It has a fuller soundstage and a broader soundstage than the Advent, just not quite as full as the 810. So seems pretty obvious. You should get something more when you have, you know, spend more money, get more something out of the next model line, the next model up. But that held true. I did feel that difference, you know, in the 710. So I gave them a 16 on imaging because when I do compare it to the Advent, it is quite a bit better. So moving on to the lows, big difference here. It doesn't obviously doesn't go as low as the 810. Doesn't go as low as the Advent from my perspective either. So does a nice job, but in this particular case, I think I would add a sub to these, giving them a little more punch on the lower end. You do that, you know, you have an astounding setup. I think they would pretty much, you know, a lot of people I think would find them very nice and really a step up from a lot of other speakers. So just the combination, just alone, they didn't have enough bass, I think, for most. Which, if I'm going to say that, because I'm pretty happy with most bass. I'm not really bass heavy in most of the things I listen to, but in these, I kind of felt like, especially when I was A-Bing them, I kind of felt like I wanted at least a small sub to be added to them. So for that, I ended up giving them a score of 12. On to the mids. Well, you know, they're very similar to the 810. I found them a little beefier, you know, a little more there, a little more, you know, substance. There's just more to it there. On these domes do put out just a very nice sound, and you know, they do stand out. Advent, a lot of ADS fans out there, and for good reason. Their sound is just, you know, like soothing in a way, and I'll give the overall. But for the mids, I ended up giving them a 17 against the Advents. On to the highs, same as the 810 pretty much. No brightness, no shrillness, no harshness, just pleasant. And there's just nothing to complain about and everything to rave about. This dome, you know, drivers that originally, you know, came from Braun, just well made. The coating and the dome itself just puts a nice uniform soundstage out there, and in such a nice, pleasant way. And there's just nothing to say negatively about them. So gave the highs a 17, which is another point higher than the Advent. So all combined, so took away a little bit on the style, took a little bit away on the lows, added back, you know, in other areas. So overall, it gets a score of 74. So in summary, I had compared and made a comment that the L810 was a nice juicy steak compared to like an NS1000 that's a bit more like champagne, more crisp and bubbly, and you sort of have to choose which way do you want to go. Well, Same here. I would say it's a juicy steak, just maybe a leaner cut, if you will. So, whereas to me a ribeye is a nice juicy steak, I would maybe say this is a nice New York strip, just a little leaner, because there's just not as much volume here. So that's kind of it. I think if you have space considerations, need a little more flexibility, you'll be very, very happy with the 710. I've had these for a very long time. I use them in my home for 8 years or so, and thoroughly enjoy them. But if you want a little bit more, step up the line a little, in the next, and you'll get a little more for that. The 910 is coming. Be very interesting. It might be a little while longer before I get to the 910, but that's on the way. And so we'll kind of sum up things with that, and then I would like to do an overall ADS review as well. So some more ADS related videos coming, but before I get there, I'll have some other things to talk about before those come out. So that's it. Hope you enjoyed that. If you want to keep up on future videos, hit subscribe, and if you want to get notified, hit that bell. And as always, thank you guys so much for tuning in.